So yeah, we're back again.
Yeah, we started.
Yeah.
I think we ended the last recording was based on the gut, the second brain.
Second brain.
The second brain. Now the scientists are realizing, and we've been talking about gut feel. So I was reading a couple of research, and it's very interesting. You have more bacterial DNA, roughly around 100 trillion bacterial cells than your own cells in your body, and you have more bacterial DNA than your own DNA. And a lot of these, because in your gut you carry apparently 2 to 3 kilograms of this microbiota, the bacteria and all of that, and the overall microbiota, in a way, does kind of influence who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So it influences your decision making, it influences your character, it influences your personality and all of that, and it helps your decision making.
Absolutely. When you think about gut feeling, there is something called the enteric nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a second brain, like you said,
biggest nerve that's
and then the whole nervous system,
which
then there is something called the gut-brain axis. So people have been studying about this for a long time, but like you said, now we've been talking more about leaky gut, for instance, absorption of certain substances in a certain way, gut microbes, all of that is becoming relevant, and it has implications. So for instance, people talk about nutrition as medicine now. There is alternative medicine, functional medicine, integrated medicine. There are so many things. Even in the field of medicine, people are recognizing the need to integrate, gut health with the rest of the body. So it is, as you say, it is very popular. And one of my other major areas of interest is influence of emotions on decision making. We have always thought about decision making as a logical process. And certainly during my MBA days, I remember having a module on decision making, decision science as they called it. How do you make a decision? With all the data that's given. But then many times we find that our emotions hijack our logical systems that help us in making those decisions. It happens all the time. You lose the plot many times. And the cost of making emotional decisions is huge. Personal cost, relationships, company decisions, country, for instance, military decisions. So I think it's very, very important that we kind of look after ourselves, look at gut health, and then think about the influence of that on our decisions.
This is interesting because this is why I feel that some of the information that is available today through social media can really help you understand things much better. For example, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, you will have to literally research these things. And today, information is available to people. You go to the Google, you type what you need, and you will most likely find a few pages of information. Now, because you said, people are now discovering that the gut health is important. I think not all, but some people will probably want to take that decision that, no, you know what, I need to eat healthy. I need to make sure that my bacterial health inside my gut is right. And this is where I think it's important for me, at least I see how much of me is really me, or how much of I is really me, when so much of my personality, emotions, and all of that comes from a bacteria. I watched a research where a scientist kept 2 types of rat. One is a rat with sterile gut, no bacteria, and that rat was risk taker. It had no idea. And the other rat, which has a bit of bacteria in it, it was a bit risk averse. So I think without even us knowing, we don't think, why are we making this decision? And that's what it hit me, that, some of the decisions we are making, is based on the ecosystem that we are. The whole microbiota, the whole bacteria, the whole of it. And this is why I think, we were discussing this the other day, that I think people are kind of, and I think you'll have a perspective to it, and I'd like to hear it. Is I think there is a conflict between what the narrative is being set by the society, by the tradition, I think, or the culture, that this is your culture, this is your tradition, this is what you need to do, and what you end up thinking about yourself. So there is a disconnect. And I think it'll be interesting to understand your perspective, and if you come across people in your field that who are struggling to connect and who are struggling because they feel they are this, but the narrative that they have been conditioned on is completely different.
I think you picked up on a very important point, about this, how much of me is actually me. I was on a webinar last week with some colleagues from the US. I think it was the integrative medicine faculty or some academy.
Right.
And they were talking about, are we inhabiting the bacterial world, the gut bacterial world, or are they in our world? So it is a profound conversation. I couldn't fully get it at that point, but now talking to you, I'm reflecting on it. Makes sense. Like you said, maybe it's their world that we are inhabiting.
Absolutely. If you look at it, we didn't arrive before the bacteria. The bacteria were there.
Yes.
So we are, and I think we are an ecosystem. This is where I think if we start considering that we are not an individual, but an entire, spaceship of bacteria, meaning an entire ecosystem, then I think a lot of our egos and a lot of that, I need to do this, I need to do that. And again, fancy thing is, a lot of people will call it spirituality. Oh, look at this, guys, we're now talking about spirituality. But are we? Please.
No, this is reality. Now, I just had a 2-hour conversation with my junior as a trainee, and she said, wow, this is profound. I said, this is real. Because you have forgotten what is real, right? Because what is real? You really take it to the bare bones, and that is real. So this is the truth, isn't it? And I think you made a very important point there, Sanjeev. We live in a time where we can organize information the way we want it. We have the help of algorithms thanks to Google and other companies. So if we say gut bacteria, it'll pull out everything that is relevant to gut bacteria, whereas 30 years ago we didn't have that information. So now, we are in a better position to analyze some of these very complex areas, but we're still very far away from understanding the mind and how we make decisions and so on and so forth. But this is important, what we put in our mouth, what is in our gut, it does influence, our decisions. So that is very, very important to consider,
I think this is again something I would like you to maybe share your perspective. I think decision making is probably not just a simple process. I personally feel, and this is going back to my own experience, I think decision making, there is an entire infrastructure around decision making, and I really try to unravel it inside my mind to see, okay, what do I need to do make a good decision? And I think the brain works in a way where it goes back to the conversation we were having. Brain is a tool, and it is there to do a work. So I realized, I cannot really blame myself for making a wrong or right decision. I take the information, my brain takes that information, I rely on my infrastructure and resources or tools. I would like to call them wisdom, ability to assess information, ability to foresee things in the future and all of that, and then make a decision. Whether it's right or wrong, that's not the brain's fault. It's the expectations probably that makes a decision right or wrong. So, it's 4 plus 4 is 8. That is a right decision. But if 4 plus 4 in real life is not 8, then you say, oh my God, I made a wrong decision, right?
Yeah, the decision is weighed based on the outcomes of the decision, right? You know, if it works out well, wow, good decision made. You know, if it turns out bad because of external factors, bad decision.
Yeah.
You know, and I think what is very important is one has to be comfortable with the decision-making process. When there's a conflict in it, the outcome often isn't great, and sometimes you're not satisfied with whatever outcome you get. So, giving you an example, you know, you would have had a good outcome, but still you went through a lot of misery in making that decision that you don't enjoy the outcome.
Yeah, true.
You know, so that happens. So again, we come to the journey that's more important. The process of decision making is what is important. Of course, the society, the world around you judges you based on the outcome of the decision.
Yeah, exactly.
But the self judges the self based on the process of the decision making. You know, so if you got a good rank at the end of a long study week, or if you got a good bonus, everyone is saying it's great. But the person who's gone through that thing, oh my God, this was so difficult. I wish I never did that. Because by the time they come to enjoy the fruits of their decision, they're too tired. They wasted the time on the laborious process. And that hits people a lot. And this is one of the things we talked about in the videos yesterday, where even when there is relative wealth, when there's a lot of material comfort around people, they feel extremely conflicted, and they are in distress many times. So decisions. I think we could do so many videos on decisions because there are so many formats and perspectives on it. But I think this is important to touch upon. And we're hoping that we'll get more perspectives from
let's have another 10-12 minutes, and I think we need to see if there is something we are on to something.
Absolutely. Let's go to the next one.